You won't believe what happened that afternoon in my study. Even now, when I think back to it, my heart still races a little. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing where everyone's tuning in. And if stories like this one make you feel something real, something human, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and stay with me till the end. This one changed the way I see myself. It started on an ordinary Thursday, the kind where time seems to stretch and fold back on itself. The house was quiet after lunch, and I remember thinking how strange that was. Usually there was always some kind of background noise, a television humming, a clock ticking louder than it should, or the faint murmur of my daughter's voice drifting from the other room. But that day it was still. I was in the study, sorting through old papers, bills that needed filing, memories that needed dusting off. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper, the scent of order and routine. Then came a soft knock. When I turned, I saw him, Daniel, my daughter's boyfriend. He stood there, half in the hallway light, half in shadow, his posture uncertain but polite. I'd known him for a few months, seen him come and go, always courteous, always quiet. He wasn't like most young men I'd met. There was a patience about him, a thoughtfulness that didn't need to announce itself. But still, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of surprise seeing him there. "Hi, Mrs. Callahan," he said, hesitating at the doorway. "Hi, I didn't mean to bother you. I just wanted to ask something." "Come in," I said, gesturing toward the old chair near the bookshelf. "You're not bothering me. What's on your mind?" He stepped in carefully, as though afraid to disturb the air itself. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting warm golden lines across the wooden floor. He looked nervous, but not in the way of someone hiding something, more like someone carrying a question too big for their chest. I sat back down behind the desk, pretending to arrange a few papers, but really, I was studying him. His eyes darted toward the shelves, toward the family photos, one of my daughter as a little girl, another of my late husband, smiling in that easy, faraway way he always did. The sight of that photo tugged at something inside me, the old ache of loss that never really disappears, only softens with time. Daniel cleared his throat. "Hi, I wanted to talk to you about Emma. About us, I guess." I nodded, folding my hands together. "All right," I said softly. "Go on." He took a breath, as if weighing every word before letting it go. "She's wonderful, you know that. But lately, I felt unsure. Not about her, not exactly, but about myself. About where I'm going, what I'm doing. Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough for her." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It's strange, the way youth can look so steady from a distance, yet up close it trembles with uncertainty. I remembered being his age, wondering the same things, feeling like every choice might change everything. "I think everyone wonders that," I said finally. "Even at my age, I still do." He looked up, surprised. "You?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, of course. Life doesn't stop asking questions, Daniel. It just changes the way it asks them." He smiled back, but his eyes were still clouded. "I guess I thought, by the time you're older, you've figured things out." That made me laugh softly. You know, I used to think the same thing. I thought turning 60 would mean I had all the answers neatly filed away. But honestly, I'm still learning, still fumbling through the pages. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the sunlight catching the edge of his jaw. That's kind of comforting, actually, to know that never really changes. We sat there in a comfortable silence for a while, the kind that feels like understanding. The clock ticked softly. Outside, a car passed by, its sound fading into the hum of the afternoon. I realized as I watched him that what I felt wasn't the awkwardness of being alone with my daughter's boyfriend. It was something gentler, more grounded, a recognition of shared humanity across the years that separated us. "You remind me a little of my husband," I said quietly, almost without meaning to. He used to doubt himself the same way. Always so careful, always afraid of not being enough. "What did you tell them?" Daniel asked. "I told him that being enough isn't about certainty," I said. "It's about trying, about showing up, even when you're not sure of yourself. That's what makes a person enough." He looked down, nodding slowly. "Thank you," he said, his voice low. I think I needed to hear that. Something shifted then, a subtle, wordless understanding that passed between us. It wasn't attraction or discomfort. It was connection, the kind that comes when two people from different corners of life see the same truth at the same time. I felt unexpectedly emotional, though I couldn't quite name why. When he stood to leave, the light had changed, softer now, the golden hour seeping through the curtains. He paused at the door and looked back at me. "You know," he said, "you're really easy to talk to." "Thank you, Daniel," I said, smiling. "That means more than you know." After he left, I sat there a long time, staring at the photo of my husband. The study was quiet again, but it felt different, fuller somehow, as if the air itself carried the echo of that conversation. I thought about Daniel, about my daughter, about the way life weaves connections we never expect. Maybe that's what it means to keep living, to keep listening, to keep learning from the people who cross your path, no matter how unlikely they seem. I leaned back in my chair, the sun warming my face, and for the first time in a while, I felt something like peace. There was no grand revelation, no dramatic ending, just a small, quiet shift inside me. A reminder that understanding, real understanding, often happens in the moments we least anticipate. And if you've ever had one of those moments where someone surprises you, teaches you something about yourself, tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too. The days that followed that afternoon felt different somehow, though I couldn't quite explain why. The house still creaked the same way it always did in the evenings. The same light still spilled through the kitchen window every morning, but there was a quiet awareness lingering inside me, a sense that something subtle had shifted. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the way that conversation with Daniel had stirred old memories I thought I'd long tucked away. Before I go on, if you're watching this now, tell me in the comments which city you're in. I love seeing how far these stories travel, from small towns to big cities, each of you listening with your own coffee mug, your own memories. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because what unfolded in the days after, well, even now, I still think about it. It was the following Sunday afternoon. Emma had gone out with her friends, and Daniel had stopped by to help her fix something on her car. I didn't expect to see him inside, but after about an hour, he knocked gently on the back door. His hair was damp with sweat, his shirt slightly smudged from engine oil, and there was a modest pride in his face, the kind that comes from solving something with your own two hands. "Car's all set," he said, stepping into the kitchen. "She'll be happy about that." "Thank you for helping her," I said. "She's lucky to have someone handy around." He smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's nothing. I actually like fixing things. Makes me feel useful." That word, useful, caught my attention. It had a weight to it, an echo. I knew that feeling too well. The quiet craving to still have purpose, even as the years roll by and the world feels like it's moving on without you. I motioned toward the kettle. "Tea?" He nodded, and soon we were both seated at the small kitchen table, steam curling between us. The air smelled faintly of mint and wood polish. Outside, the garden swayed under a gentle breeze, the late summer kind that always makes me nostalgic. He glanced around the kitchen, taking in the details, the chipped mug I always used, the little clock above the stove, the fading photograph of my husband and me at the beach. "You've got a warm house," he said after a while. "It feels lived in." "That's another way of saying it's old," I teased, and he laughed, shaking his head. "No, I mean it," he said earnestly. "You can tell when a house has stories in it. Most places I've been in feel empty, like people just passed through. But here, you can feel the years." That comment touched something deep in me. For so long, I'd felt like my home had become just a quiet shell, rooms filled with things but missing the heartbeat they once had. Yet here was this young man, seeing it differently, seeing it the way it used to be. I looked around, really looked. The curtains Emma had picked when she was a teenager, the scuffed table that had hosted countless family dinners, the painting my husband and I bought on our first trip together. It was all still here, quietly alive. "You know," I said softly, "I used to hate how small this house felt. After my husband passed, every room just reminded me of what was missing. But lately," I paused, searching for the right words. "Lately, I've started to see it as enough, maybe even comforting." Daniel nodded slowly. "I get that. After my dad left, my mom used to say the house felt too big. I think sometimes it's not the walls, it's the silence." That sentence hung in the air for a moment. The silence. He was right. That's what it was. The silence of absence, of all the words we never say aloud. I watched him as he spoke, and I could tell that beneath his easy manners there was a young man who had carried too much responsibility too early. It wasn't pity I felt, it was recognition. Two people from different generations, both navigating the quiet spaces left behind by others. "You seem older than your age," I said, and he smiled faintly. "My mom says the same thing," he replied. "I guess you grow up faster when life gets complicated early." We talked for a long time, about music, about how he missed his hometown, about how Emma was thinking of changing her major again. It was strange how easily the conversation flowed. It didn't feel like a chat between a mother and her daughter's boyfriend. It felt like two people simply talking, seeing each other without expectation. At one point, the afternoon light dimmed, and I got up to switch on the lamp near the window. As I turned back, I caught him looking at the old piano in the corner. Its keys were dusty, a few slightly yellowed. "You play?" he asked. "I used to," I said. "Not in years." "Would you?" he asked, almost gently. "I'd like to hear." I hesitated, but there was something about the way he said it, no pressure, just genuine curiosity, that made me sit down on the bench. My fingers hovered uncertainly over the keys, rusty and unsure. Then I pressed one, then another, and soon a melody stumbled out, fragile at first, then steadier. It was an old tune my husband loved, one I hadn't played since before he passed. Daniel sat quietly, listening. The room seemed to hold its breath. By the time I stopped, my eyes were damp, though I hadn't noticed when the tears began. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "You should play more often." I smiled through the emotion. "Maybe I will." He helped me close the piano lid, careful not to let it slam. When our hands brushed for a moment, it wasn't awkward. It was human. A fleeting connection between two people who understood loss and the search for meaning in the small things that remain. After he left that evening, I sat in the same spot, the air still humming faintly with the memory of the music. I realized that life has a way of sending us reminders when we least expect them. That kindness and understanding can come from the most surprising places. Daniel wasn't just my daughter's boyfriend anymore. He had become a quiet mirror, reflecting parts of myself I thought I'd lost. And as I turned off the lamp and the room fell into soft shadow, I whispered a quiet thank you. To him, to my husband, to time itself, for reminding me that even at 60, there are still new songs waiting to be played. The morning light filtered through the curtains, touching everything in my study with that soft, forgiving glow that only early autumn brings. The air carried a faint chill, the kind that makes you wrap your cardigan a little tighter. I was reading the paper, half distracted, when I heard the back gate creak. A few seconds later, a familiar voice called out from the porch. "Mrs. Callahan? You home?" It was Daniel again. I smiled before I even realized it. His visits had become more frequent lately, though never in a way that felt intrusive. Sometimes he came by to fix something, sometimes just to drop off something for Emma. And sometimes, like that morning, it seemed he came simply because it felt natural to. If you're listening to this right now, tell me in the comments what the weather's like where you are. Here, the air had that crisp edge that makes you feel alive. And if you've been following my story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Not because I'm asking you to, but because I think, maybe, you'll see a bit of yourself in what comes next. I called out, "Come in, Daniel." Doors open. He stepped inside, carrying a small box in his hands. "I found these in the garage," he said. "Emma said they might be yours." When I looked inside, I almost laughed. Old cassette tapes, a few worn photographs, and a small wooden figurine my husband had carved decades ago. "Oh my goodness," I said, my voice catching on a mix of surprise and nostalgia. "I thought these were long gone." He smiled, setting the box on the table. "I figured they looked too personal to throw away." I reached inside, my fingers brushing over the tapes. One of them had my handwriting on the label, 85, road trip. I remembered that drive vividly. Windows rolled down, laughter spilling out, and my husband tapping the steering wheel to the beat of some long-forgotten song. I held the tape up to the light, and for a moment, I wasn't 60 anymore. I was 20, sunburned and wild, and full of hope. "You look like you're remembering something good," Daniel said quietly. "I am," I answered, setting the tape down gently. Those were simpler times. We didn't know what we had until it was gone. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think that's true for everyone. We always notice the good stuff too late." There was something in the way he said it, an undertone of his own regret. I looked at him, really looked. He had that same wariness behind his eyes that my husband used to get when life felt too heavy. I didn't press him to explain, but I wanted to offer something. Not advice exactly, but understanding. "You know," I said, "we spend so much of our lives worrying about the future that we forget the present is quietly slipping away. You'll never have this day again. Any of us." He took a slow breath, as if letting that settle. "That's true," he said after a pause. "Sometimes I forget that." For a while we sat there, listening to the faint hum of the old refrigerator. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was companionable, the kind that asks for nothing and gives everything. Then he looked up. "Would you want me to set up the old player? Maybe we could listen to one of the tapes." I hesitated, my heart giving a small flutter. "You know how to work that ancient thing?" He grinned. "I can try." We moved to the corner of the room where the tape player had been gathering dust. He fiddled with it, cleaning the heads, adjusting the knobs. After a few minutes of static and a faint wear, a song crackled to life, muffled but unmistakably familiar. The melody of youth, laughter, and long drives. "Oh," I'd whispered, "that's us. That's me singing along." The sound filled the room, fragile and imperfect, but so alive. I closed my eyes, and for a heartbeat, I could see it all again. The blur of trees outside the car window, my husband's grin, the world opening wide ahead of us. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me, his expression soft. "That's beautiful," he said. "It was," I replied. "We were." Something in my chest ached, but it wasn't sorrow. It was gratitude. for the love I'd had, for the memories I could still touch, for the strange comfort of sharing them with someone who actually listened. After a while, I realized I'd been talking more than I intended. I told him about my husband, how they'd met, the things we used to argue about, the way he'd hum while fixing things around the house. Daniel listened quietly, not interrupting once. There's a kind of respect in real listening, not the kind that nods politely, but the kind that sees you. When the tape clicked off, the room went still again. "Thank you," I said softly, "for helping me remember." He shrugged a little, smiling. "I didn't do much." "You did," I said. "You reminded me that not everything from the past has to stay buried." He looked down, fiddling with a loose thread on his sleeve. "Sometimes I think I look for the past in people, maybe because I miss what I never had." That admission hit me quietly. There was a loneliness in it, not loud, but familiar. I wanted to tell him that he wasn't alone in that feeling, that longing isn't something age takes away. It just changes shape. Instead, I said, "You're a good soul, Daniel. You'll find what you're looking for. Maybe not in the way you expect, but you will." He gave a small smile, and I could tell he believed me, even if just for that moment. When he left, I stayed in the study long after the sound of his car faded. The tape still sat in the player, waiting for another song, another story. The house felt alive again, not with noise, but with presence. That night, as I stood by the window, the wind rustling through the trees, I realized how rare it is to find moments that wake something inside you. Not passion, but awareness. Awareness that life still has meaning, even in its quieter chapters. I thought about Daniel's words, about the way he listened, and about the sound of my younger self on that tape, laughing, singing, alive. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like time had taken something from me. I felt like it had been patiently waiting, holding pieces of me safe until I was ready to remember them again. It was nearly 2 weeks before I saw Daniel again. The days in between felt strangely full, as if the simple act of remembering had loosened something inside me. I started playing the piano again, just a little every morning, fingers stiff at first, but finding their rhythm. I even dusted off the old camera my husband had given me and took it into the garden, capturing the way the light filtered through the autumn leaves. Life had texture again. Before I begin this part, I want to thank those of you who've stayed with me through the story. I've seen your comments from Chicago, Austin, Portland, and little towns I'd never even heard of. It warms me to know that you're out there, listening, maybe seeing bits of your own life between my words. If you haven't yet, take a second to subscribe and share where you're watching from. This next part, this final part, is the one that still makes me stop and breathe when I think about it. It was a Friday evening when Daniel stopped by. Emma had called earlier to say she'd be staying late at work, so I assumed he was coming to pick up something for her. But when I opened the door, I could tell from his face it wasn't about that. He looked tired, not in a physical way, but in the way people do when they've been turning something over and over in their minds. "Hi," he said softly. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." We ended up in the study again, the same place where everything had quietly begun. The late sun poured through the window, painting the walls in a soft amber glow. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood near the bookshelf, running his hand along the spines, as if he was searching for the right place to start. "I think I owe you an explanation," he finally said. "For what?" I asked. "For the way I've been around you," he said, his eyes flicking up to meet mine. "I've been thinking a lot since the day we talked. About life. About Emma. About what I really want to do." I stayed quiet, letting him find his own rhythm. "I've been lost for a while," he continued, "trying to be what people expect, a certain kind of boyfriend, a certain kind of man. But when I talked to you, it was like I saw something I didn't know I was missing. Not just advice, but perspective. You reminded me that it's okay to stop pretending I've got everything figured out. I felt my throat tighten a little, though I wasn't sure why. There was something profoundly humbling about hearing that our small, ordinary conversations had meant something real to him. I'm glad if anything I said helped, I told him. But you don't owe me an explanation. We all find clarity in our own time. He nodded, exhaling. Emma and I, we decided to take a break. It's not a fight or anything dramatic. It just felt right. I think we both need to figure ourselves out. I looked at him quietly, not judging, not surprised. Sometimes that's the most mature thing two people can do, I said. He smiled faintly. That's what I told her. He finally sat down, hands folded. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we never really stop learning. I want to do something different with my life, something that means something. I asked him what that was, and his face lit up in that way only young faces can. Teaching, he said. High school English, maybe. It sounds crazy, but I keep thinking about how much it matters to have someone who listens. I smiled then, a real, deep smile. That doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds exactly right. For a long while, we just talked. About literature, about students, about how the smallest gestures can change a person's path. It wasn't a goodbye conversation, but it felt like a turning point for both of us. As the sun dipped lower, I noticed the light had shifted again, throwing long, golden lines across the room. He glanced at the piano in the corner and then back at me. Would you play again? He asked softly. This time, I didn't hesitate. I sat down and began to play. Not the same song as before, but something quieter, more thoughtful. A melody without words. Halfway through, I realized I was smiling. Not from memory, but from something else. The joy of simply being here, alive, sharing a moment that needed no explanation. When the last note faded, the room was still. That, Daniel said finally, sounds like peace. Maybe it is, I said. Maybe it finally is. He stood then, and I walked him to the door. At the threshold, he turned to me. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan, he said, for everything. You probably don't even realize how much you've helped me. I reached out and rested a hand on his arm gently. You helped me too, Daniel, I said, more than you know. He smiled, that quiet, grateful smile that said more than words could, and then he was gone. After he left, I lingered by the open door for a long while, watching the light fade from gold to blue. The air was cool, the evening settling in. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the sound of life went on as usual. But inside, something felt lighter. I went back to the study, the familiar hum of the house wrapping around me. The old cassette tape was still there on the desk. I pressed play again, listening to that faint echo of laughter and song from decades ago. Only this time it didn't make me ache. It made me smile. We never know who will walk into our lives or what they'll bring with them. Sometimes it's love, sometimes it's loss, and sometimes it's a reminder that connection doesn't fade with age, and understanding can come from the most unexpected places. I turned off the player, stood by the window, and watched the sky turn violet. And in that still, gentle moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, contentment. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that settles quietly into your bones. So if you're watching this, wherever you are, take a moment to reach out to someone, even if it's just to listen, or to share a memory, or to say thank you. You never know whose heart you might touch. And maybe, just maybe, they'll help you find a little peace too.